This is The Second Studio, hosted by the Architecture and Design Office fame. My name is David Lee, and with me is Marina Borderonay. The two of us are architects, partners at the office, and of course, hosts of the show. And today, our guest is Ben Uyeda.
Ben is the founder of Homemade Modern and the Modern Home Project. He also was the co-founder of Zero Energy Design and Free Green. And lastly, he co-founded the Reset Hotel in Joshua Tree.
Yes. And I think everyone listening probably knows who he is already. But what do we talk about with Ben? We talk about how he got into architecture and design. I think a lot of this conversation was him sharing his thoughts about the profession and the kind of the status of it and where we could be heading and solving and addressing the cost of architecture in alternative ways. It was a very dynamic conversation. We talk about, the academics in architecture and what it's like to be a student and some of the downsides of some of the educational settings. And then the recording abruptly ended because we were just talking, and we realized we were out of time. So we'll probably have a part two at some point in the future. But this was a fun one, and I know you guys are going to get a lot out of it. So sponsors.
Available with Revit version 2023.1 onward, Autodesk Insight is a next-generation carbon analysis tool that can help you make the leap to low-carbon design. With only a few clicks, Insight lets you analyze, understand, and track the embodied and operational carbon impact of your design choices. You can then visualize opportunities for energy efficiency and carbon mitigation with its flexible dashboards, helping you make more sustainable and informed decisions. Check out the Insight link in our show notes to find out more. This episode of The Second Studio is brought to you by BQE Core, the all-in-one firm management software built for architects. Designed by architects for architects, Core helps you track time effortlessly, manage projects seamlessly, and get paid faster so you can focus on design, not spreadsheets. With powerful automation and real-time insights, it's everything you need to run a smarter, more profitable firm. See how BQE Core can transform your practice by clicking the link in our show notes.
This is The Second Studio with myself, Marina, and our guest, Ben. Here we go.
I grew up in just north of Santa Barbara in the San Ynez Valley in a very pedestrian suburban environment. And I think the most inspiring thing about it was the lack of capital A architecture. It was, an Albertsons, kind of a strip mall or two.
Yeah.
Big box retail came a little bit later, and suburban housing tracts on like quarter acre lots and then ranch houses and stuff like that. So I actually think that some of the best inspiration that's out there isn't trying to pull from the greats. It's actually pulling from the wealth of mediocrity that surrounds us and kind of growing up in a place that didn't have intentional architecture. It was just building for the sake of building. Kind of made it feel like you could do a lot of things. But I think the early signs was I blew up my parents' patio because I think I was like 11 or 12 and I wanted to make a sword. So I got a book from the library and built a forge using my mom's hairdryer and some cinder blocks.
What?
But as you can probably imagine, there was too much moisture in their concrete patio. And so it blew a whole chunk of it off and lit the yard on fire. So
Okay.
there were early signs, but they were related more to the anarchist cookbook probably than something from Corbusier.
Yeah, it sounds more like what's the name of that show? There's two, I think it's not around anymore, but a Mythbusters kind of vibe.
Somewhere between Mythbusters and Jackass.
Sounds good. But expand on the idea that the mediocrity of most of the built environment could be a point of inspiration. I think that's an interesting perspective. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, so in architecture school, all of our case studies would be these magnificent pieces that were rare commissions, right? And I think so much of studying film and architecture, which I think are really good comparisons, is you're looking at success that was derived after the commission of a lifetime was given. I remember a friend of mine worked for Herzog Demeron, and she showed me this PDF that had their entire projects throughout the history of their firm's lifetime. And it starts with like vernacular houses, early projects just to kind of pay the bills.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden you see this interjection from pharmaceutical companies like Novartis and stuff, and these budgets sort of go up. And so if you look at that timeline, the greatest sort of point of creative departure was the infusion of new commissions. Mm-hmm. And when I was doing architecture, I always felt that, like, when you finish the building, you kind of want to kind of like pound your chest a little bit and be like, wow, this is amazing. We created this. But you're not really factoring in the opportunity cost of, if our firm didn't exist, another firm would have got it. And our actual impact is only how much better we are than the other firm. And in some cases, they might have been better. Mm. And so I've always thought that where we should look for inspiration is towards what's not being designed. And for architecture as a profession, that's a lot of stuff. If you look at the most common building type in America, it's the single family house. I think, and this data might be a little bit old, but when I was last looking at this, when I was doing a startup, it was like less than 5% of the houses built in America have direct involvement from an architect. Mm-hmm. And about 30% of them came from stock house plans. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking for how to kind of make the built environment better, you should look at to where it's being neglected, not to where there's this bottleneck of all these talented creative designers all trying to compete for the same commission.
That's a really, really good observation. And it's something that, to be honest, we've thought about more and more this past, well, it's hard to believe it's been like 14 or 15 months, in part because of the fires in Los Angeles. And so, quick kind of aside, as a result of the fires, obviously thousands of people lost their houses. And a lot of the people were not planning to, hire an architect and do this like amazing custom house. And a lot of them also were underinsured by a lot. And so they would approach us and other architects and everyone in the industry saying, this is my budget, can I do something? And for a lot of us practicing, the architects who we're colleagues with who do, more like high-end custom home projects, it's like, that's not even... That number doesn't even, I don't think that's even feasible. And then, long story short, we become very good at kind of tightening the belt and figuring out very cost-effective ways to build. Hence, actually, my conversation with you about modular just a second ago. But it's become really more, I've always known this, but it's become much more in our faces, right? That, oh yeah, there's no way that we can expect 7,000 houses to be custom, beautiful works of architecture that, first and foremost cost a lot of money. There's got to be a different way to produce also beautiful architecture, but not at $1,000 a square foot, or whatever the prices might be. I think it's a really, really good point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had dalliances with modular over the last 20 years. And we consulted with the Dwell Homes, Blue Homes, did some design work for them and a lot of those modular attempts. And then the hotel that we just developed, the Reset Hotel out here in Joshua Tree, was entirely modular. Modular, if you look at the history of it since World War II, it has a consistent small footprint at the low end of the market, but has kind of, even though there's been a ton of attempts with really talented people behind it, kind of defied anything above sort of the trailer park kind of housing style. Right. And I think it's because it's competing with prefab, and every building is prefab. I think that's the sort of biggest misconception. We're going prefab. Yeah,
I
no
agree.
One goes into the woods with an axe and carves a log cabin.
Kill dries their studs on their own.
Right? Everything's already a product. Yeah. Your toilet, your window, your tile, all these things are not raw materials. They're all productized already. So to do successful modular at scale, you would have to have some sort of cost advantage to make up for the limitations of shipping. And you would be so vertically integrated, and it would be close to being like a car startup. And we know how hard it is to do a new car company to get that scale. Plus, they have way more limitations on shipping. So I think modular does have a lot of effective opportunities. We used it because of the sort of remote location of where we're building. But in retrospect, we probably should have just done modular for the hotel rooms and site built for all the common spaces.
Interesting. I like the point you made also, which is that, the terms modular and prefab oftentimes get a bad rap, especially in the minds of those who are not within the industries. I was actually having just a very identical or parallel conversation with somebody recently, and it was about, it doesn't really matter who it was, but they were like, well, modular, it's I don't know if we can finance that because of X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, but you do realize that, or prefab, I think was the conversation, like everything is prefab. I'm like, so if you mentioned a trusses are not built on site. This person was like, no, of course not. I'm like, okay, well, just expand that thinking to a full cassette or a wall and then expand it to, 6 sides. What's the difference? And they're like, oh, that's a good point. I'm like, yeah, man. I think it's an interesting space, and I hope something gets solved there in a really good manner. But going back to your story, so you're a kid, you're blowing up decks. Did you go straight from high school into architecture school, or like did you have a parent or uncle who was an architect? Like, how did you know that architecture was going to be a thing to pursue and study?
I did have an uncle that was an architect, so I knew what it was as a profession. I didn't go right to college. Neither one of my parents went to college, and so it was never really suggested. I didn't even take the SATs till I think I was like 20 or 21. Okay. So my early ambitions were in martial arts. So I won the under 18 World USK Karate Championships and thought I was going to be, the next Jean-Claude Van Damme. And
that's a good role model.
Yeah. I mean, he can dance. He dresses really fly. We had this sort of pleated pants on lockdown for a long time. But that was like the early things. I just kind of did what was tangible and where I got the most kind of, social reward from. And early on, that was more sports and stuff like that. I was never good at drawing. Like my freehand drawing and penmanship to this day is atrocious. But I remember I was going to Santa Barbara Community College just because things weren't really panning out on the martial arts front and had worked construction jobs and a bunch of other things. And I kind of fell in love with academics first and said, oh, I don't just have to do physical things. I have a brain. I can invest in it. So that was exciting. Took some like 3D art and design classes there and felt like I had like an aptitude for it, particularly in kind of like hacking around and coming up with ideas to make up for my deficit in freehand drawing. And then I started thinking, took the SATs and got good scores. And my advisor was like, oh, you can get into good colleges. You should start thinking seriously about where you want to go for university. So it kind of was like a late bloomer academically. But once I kind of got my foot wet, I was like, oh, wait, I don't have to do physical labor for the rest of my life. Although, spoiler alert, that's where I'm back to a nice blend now. And so I remember like getting one of those like U.S. News and World Report kind of college review guides that were big back in the day. And I was kind of looking through it, seeing what schools were good. I was kind of like, going to the library and looking at, where different universities were. And I kind of thought about architecture. I got into USC for business and I got into Cornell for architecture. And I was kind of deciding, I kind of researched on who makes more money coming out, and it was business by a long shot. But then when I sort of thought about, making this decision that would sort of define it, it felt like the sort of it felt like a nice mix of creativity and profession that was a respectable career. But still would possibly be creative. Although later on, as you both know, the amount of creativity in the day-to-day of architecture sometimes is a little overstated.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. Those are really good schools to get into. I want to talk about your martial arts background real quick, because I actually grew up also doing karate. So what did you compete? Was it sparring? Was it kata? What type of karate
It's
was
point
it?
fighting, right?
Point fighting? Okay, cool.
Yeah. So it's kind of fake fighting.
Yeah.
And martial arts was like the first time that I kind of realized that, some of these things are entirely built on bullshit and not been sort of thoroughly tested. And also parts of architecture kind of the same way. But these things are, strip mall karate exists in every mediocre suburb around the country. And not until the UFC did we really see how exposed these things were. That they were teaching stuff from, it was a guy with a ponytail and a pot belly kind of mispronouncing Japanese words and, following the Tao of Steven Seagal. Like it was, but in these little microcosms, they are built up as sort of heroes and they have their things. And I remember kind of learning, like, I don't really think any of this is going to work in a fight. But it's this game of point fighting, which is similar to like fencing without the swords. And I was good at it, but it felt kind of hollow. But it was the thing that I excelled at the most. So I kind of invested a lot of time into it. And, definitely sidetracked me from pursuits that would have a lot more ROI lifetime wise.
I mean, point fighting is interesting. I remember one of the... this is so long ago, one of like the classes that I was a part of, they were training us how to be successful in point fighting. And one of the things we learned, and I don't know if you maybe learned this as well, was that so when you punch in point fighting, it's not just about the punch going toward the person. It's more about pulling the punch back to demonstrate that you've made, quote, contact. And I was like, this is weird. But this is a fight. Like, why would I care about my arm retracting to show to the judges that, I made contact? Like, I would not care about that. But from my recollection, at least, I did a little bit of point fighting, but not a lot. That was a big part of like the game, is making sure you're communicating visually that you made contact, even though, in point fighting, for people who don't know, you're not meant to actually like punch the person. You're supposed to make a little bit of contact and that's it.
Do you have to make sound too?
Yeah, you do. You have to be super loud to demonstrate that you've made, quote, contact. I don't know, Ben, did you learn the same things?
It's a ceremonial dance of fake aggression.
Yeah.
But I would say, there is some benefits from it. Like it does teach you to be evasive and dodge people well and to sort of have an alertness. But it is terrible for developing significant sort of offensive capabilities.
Yeah.
Because if you're training really hard towards pulling punches back,
I know. What's going to happen in a real fight?
When things get real, that's your muscle memory and your instinct.
Yeah.
Probably leave the other person very confused. What's going on here?
But do you feel like karate, kind of like taught you, I don't know, a certain mindset that is helping you in what you do now? Like,
no, not at all. Especially because like we have this association. You know how it is with like all things. So I'm half Japanese. So it's like when someone tells you that like they have this really good Japanese whiskey and it's fine, but it's like, it's just whiskey.
Yeah.
But like they're putting so much kind of spiritual significance by the fact that it's coming from a place that has a great history of craft and precision and all these kind of good patient pursuits of excellence. But it might just have like a few drops of that sort of blended with, Bushmills. And martial arts, by the time it gets to a lot of the suburbs, is kind of the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, so you did that. It sounds like you were actually pretty successful in that arena. And then you end up going to Cornell, which is, I think has been for many years consistently the top one or two
for undergrad,
according to whatever publication. But nevertheless, it's a very, very good school. Super curious what it was like to go there.
I kind of showed up unprepared, and because this was kind of mostly kind of engineered on my own. And so I kind of show up and I didn't apply for housing. So I just like thought, got a flight there like a few days before classes start and thought that they just kind of figure it all out and didn't open or didn't fill out like housing application forms and stuff like that. So I show up and like walk in, look for an administration office, walk in, a few hours of trying to figure out who I was and why I didn't apply for housing. So they ended up putting me in the vegan co-op because that was the only place left. So I wasn't in freshman dorms.
You say vegan?
It was a bit of, yeah.
As in like the dietary?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. It was, I learned all about sort of how bad capitalism was pretty quickly.
That tracks.
And so it was culture shock. And it was kind of one of the other reasons why I picked it. It was as geographically far from, Southern California as possible, pretty much in upstate New York. And so I remember, growing up in California too, everything's kind of casual and cool. And then I remember like walking around the campus, beautiful stone buildings. It's an incredible campus. And I see these dudes in bow ties, like singing a cappella. And it was radical culture shock. I was just like, what kind of, 19-year-olds wear bow ties and sing show tunes? Like it was weird, but it was also like super stimulating, super fun. I loved it. It felt like I was almost studying abroad because it was that culturally different in Southern California. And immediately, it was the first time where I sort of realized that I wasn't the most creative person in the room, right? Because there was 70 other freshmen. They were all super talented. I had taken City College kind of credits in Santa Barbara, but they don't transfer to the 5-year undergrad. They do for like general ed. And it was the first time that I kind of had a art or design faculty kind of just say, no, what you're doing is absolutely garbage and you have no conceptual explanation. You just think it looks cool. Explain yourself. And that was, I think, the first review. I was like kind of angry afterwards. I was like, wait, what is this? And then I kind of thought about it. I was like, oh, this is how you actually get good at something.
It's kind of taking me back now to when I was an undergrad. I know exactly what you're talking about. And we have students who listen to the show, and I'm sure some of them have gone through the same thing. It's kind of an eye-opening experience to have to produce something that is so personal, because when you're creating something, it feels like an extension of you, right? To get up there and you talk about it, and then everyone just kind of says no. You're like, why not?
Well,
and you don't have the words, you don't really have like the mechanics to even process what's happening, or to process like how to explain yourself. It's a very difficult kind of time.
But that's actually
it's awesome.
But, yeah.
That's a good mentality to have.
But it's actually what's the most precious, I feel, in creative education, is being able to be taught like critical thinking in the creative process. Because I feel like a lot of people could create things, but how many could actually critique what they've created, or understand, or reposition themselves after creating something. That takes a lot.
There's so many flaws in architectural education, but the things that I think are kind of exceptional and really stand out is one sort of project-based work that's assigned 6 credits, which means you can invest a lot of time into big projects. That's great for sort of management skills for whatever you do. If you become a filmmaker, a fashion designer, a general contractor, or become an architect. The other one is standing up in front of your work and presenting verbally in front of your peers, right? To create that sense of ownership that you can't just slide a paper under the professor's door. You have to represent your work and defend it. And those two things, the verbal presentation skills and that kind of project format, I think make it a really outstanding educational framework.
Yeah, I agree.
I love that comparison too, between slipping the paper under the door. It's a very different experience. I mean, you really get to hide behind the paper in a certain sense. So when you're at Cornell, did you go there for a bachelor's or a master's? Or both?
I did both.
Wow.
Right. So I did the overlap program because it was more cost effective because it lets you combine your 5th year of undergrad with your first year of an MArch-2. So I ended up doing all 7 years in 5 years. So I'd stick around in summer and take classes to kind of, because I basically knew that the clock was ticking on my student loans. And the more I could condense that into a shorter window of time, spending less money on housing and stuff like that. Yeah. So it was, starting, I was 21 as a freshman. So I was older than most of the other kids. So I was almost the age of some of the grad students. Yeah. So I came in like with kind of a professional mindset, like I am going to milk this university for every single dollar that I'm putting into it. And how do I extract as much value as I can during these 5 years? And, I think that's actually like a pretty good mindset to approach education, is to be kind of active with it and not passive. So if you're a student out there, you're paying them, use their resources, all of them. Like, go to office hours, make them be your mentor, make them help you find internships, use the wood shop, use the fabrication facilities, take engineering classes, really extract as much value as you can, because you're going to most likely pay for it later.
Yeah, I love that point as well. And I think it's true, when you're a, let's say, 17-year-old going off to college, a lot of, in my experience, what I've seen with students, they don't have that perspective yet, right? Because they're going straight from high school. And it's not to say they mess around or they're not serious, but there's just there's like a different mentality with students who come in older. Like, they understand the stakes are higher for them, it feels like, or they understand that.
Well, I don't think the 17-year-old realize that they're going to have to pay back the student loan. They're not really, I think, realizing that. I think once you're a little bit older and you're responsible for that, like, it's no joke. Like, you gotta get the most of it.
Yeah, gap years are often touted. And I would say the value of a gap year probably depends on what you're going to study as an undergrad. And so if you're doing like a liberal arts general sort of degree, maybe you don't need a gap year. But if you're going into something that has professional ramifications, like a 5-year undergrad architecture, I think that's where a gap year can serve you well.
So 5 years for a 7-year program, that's very, very impressive. And I'm also curious, given the type of work that you do today and some of the stuff we've talked about so far, from my understanding of Cornell is that it's a pretty well-balanced school, well-balanced in the sense that there are some schools that are very, very conceptual, very theoretical, very research-based, and there are other schools on the other end of the spectrum, let's say, that are only like concerned with practical knowledge, more like drafting skills, quote, engineering skills, even though that's not architecture, but more kind of practical things. My sense has always been that Cornell is a pretty good balance across both sides. A, was that your experience? And B, did you also resonate with the more like theoretical aspects of architecture education, or did you tend to gravitate toward one thing or the other?
It's well balanced in terms of its resources and faculty, but I would say the culture isn't, right? It's much more heavily, no one really admires the student that gets all A's in structures and building technology and environmental systems, but gets a B plus in studio. That's not seen as aspirational, even though those other classes are excellent. And even amongst the faculty, they kind of revere the people that are on the more sort of theoretical and conceptual footprint, closer to art than to building technology. So education-wise, yes, you can get all the faculty that I had was exceptional. But I'd say culturally, that's where you kind of get pushed towards, we should just do installations and write an essay that kind of explains spatial theory. And I think I saw the value in the conceptual thinking and in the ability to kind of abstract and then reassemble ideas. That part was hugely impactful. Theory without physical form resulting from it wasn't that interesting to me. So I liked theory. I think we needed theory on the practice of architecture more than what it means or could mean, and developing an arsenal of how to post-rationalize it after it's built. So I think the part that I was interested in was, how do you find like a theory or a conceptual framework for how to work that you then commit to, and it doesn't become this kind of like passive, languid process of wearing turtleneck sweaters and, the right glasses and never really, getting your hands too dirty in the gross world of capitalism and building, but instead kind of sit on the fringes and you do a little art installation and use a projector or, and then every once in a while you do like a small like project for a friend and then mostly kind of teach. That to me felt impotent and weak and not that interesting. But at the same time, following the kind of corporate route and really focusing on being a great project architecture for a big firm didn't feel that interesting either. Mm-hmm. And so I remember I think it was about my third year of undergrad. There was a reunion. And so architectural graduates came back and were hanging out around campus. And I remember asking them what they were doing, because they were all had graduated like 2 years before. And they were all like detailing fire stairs, or the rich ones were working for like OMA and were telling us like, how they got no sleep and no money. But luckily their parents just happened to have a flat in wherever the office was.
Yeah.
And so I saw really quickly that what was in front of me when I graduated. And if I followed kind of the corporate route and really, built up my sort of ability to have like a great portfolio of like almost working drawings, but like the student level of working drawings and good renderings, I could get a job for, one of the big firms. But I wouldn't be doing stuff creative, but I'd probably live in a big city that would be fun and not make as much money as my non-architectural peers. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of one option. The other option, which was not an option for me, was I could get an internship or an entry-level position at one of the prestigious firms, work for, one of the superstars, not get paid, not get any sleep, and probably not get any kind of creative equity in the projects that have someone else's name on them. And that's where I started thinking like, well, how do you start your own firm? And so I started interviewing faculty about that question, and none of them had great answers. Oh, you just work for someone else for a long time. And so around my third year of undergrad, every time I was talking to other students, I would say, hey, we got to start a firm the day we graduate, not wait. We don't want to wait until we have responsibilities and kids and, mortgages and all these things. We need to start our own firm the day we graduate.
Were the other students like, are you crazy, man? How are we going to do that?
It was a conversational filter. So eventually I found the team that we ended up starting, Zero Energy Design, which is an architecture and engineering firm with offices in Boston and New York, and does some great high-end housing. A lot of the passive house stuff they've really been sort of pioneers in. But it started as a student project. We did the 2005 Solar Decathlon. Yeah. We were the only student-led team. And I remember going to our administration and being like, hey, we want to do this design build project because I wanted built work before I graduated school. And so we convinced Nazreen to let us enter. And we were the only student-led team. We had students from engineering and architecture, and Cornell's engineering is outstanding. We had a team of over 70 students. Wow. And it was this long process of designing, fundraising, building a modular house that was completely off the grid and was entirely powered by solar. So that was we saw that as an opportunity. Wait, if we can not have a faculty advisor that takes credit for this, and instead lead this ourselves, we can leave our education with built work in our portfolio, and that should be enough to help us launch a firm. So we extracted all the brand value of Cornell to partner with companies like GE and saying, hey, you would never give tens of thousands of dollars worth of solar panels and funding to random 20-year-olds, but you would give it to Cornell for a research project. And so I think we raised a few $100,000. We got a lot of product donations. And fabricated this house that got shipped from upstate New York to the mall in Washington, D.C. And it was actually an empirical set of tests about how much energy the house produces, how it manages it, how well insulated, all these kind of things. We ended up coming in second out of all the schools, but our budget was about half of what the first place winner was.
Wow.
Dude, that's phenomenal.
That's incredible.
That's a huge, huge achievement. And it's super, super smart too. I mean, the idea more on the, I guess, business or financing side of leveraging or utilizing, Cornell's name to get it done. I mean, it's you definitely took advantage of the time and place for sure. That's phenomenal. I love your description of what the different characters in school, the teachers, the kind of value system a lot of schools have. By your description of Cornell, where I went to school, Cal Poly SLO, is very similar in terms of like the breadth of knowledge that is offered, but how everybody kind of, praises and prioritizes studio and creative folks a lot more than anything else. And I also think your description of the kind of two paths. I mean, obviously there are a lot of different paths, but broadly speaking, the two different paths on opposite ends of the spectrum when you're graduating is totally, I mean, verbatim. I have friends who went and worked at OMA exactly like you described. Exactly that.
Week and no pay, no sleep. They look like ghosts.
Exactly that. And people that go off to, to whatever big other offices like Gens or whatever places. It's weird that we see that. And I think also.
And now a little break for our show sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Chaos. They make award-winning design and visualization tools, and they're really pushing the boundaries with AI. Now, AI is shaking up the architecture and design world, and Chaos is taking a responsible approach. Their tools are built to help architects, designers, and visualization specialists to work faster and explore more ideas without replacing creativity. Basically, Chaos wants AI to make your imagination stronger, not take over. So you get to design with more freedom, create stunning visuals, and stay in control of your work. If you want to see what that looks like, tap the Chaos link in our show notes.
Dear architects, design leaders, and founders redefining the industry, if you want to shape not only buildings, but the business behind them, this is your moment. Future London Academy's Executive MBA takes you inside the boardrooms of Pentagram, Uber, Zaha Hadid Architects, and Google, where you'll master finance, strategy, and operations from the people who already excel at them. Study along peers transforming the industry worldwide and do it all in just 9 intensive weeks over 1 year between London and California. The program is award-winning, transformative, and crafted for design and architecture leaders with 15 or more years of experience. If you're ready to grow your impact, apply now by tapping the Future London Academy link in our show notes. Say goodbye to design-unfriendly spreadsheets. Programma, built by designers for designers, provides an integrated suite of tools for every phase of your project, from mood boards to advanced specification tools to project management. Seamlessly integrated, easily shareable, and always current, Programma reduces redundancy and minimizes costly errors. Share your work in the format that works for you, be it PDF spec sheets or online branded client dashboards with always up-to-date specification details. Join interior design movers and shakers and start for free by clicking the Programma link in our show notes. Experience the difference with Programma, software built for interior design workflows. There is definitely a tendency amongst students, academics, and then young professionals, therefore, to like overvalue these conceptual architecture heroes, and not to say that those firms and those people don't do good work, but it's more like they are missing out on the great benefits of education and what you can learn by being at a larger corporate office, provided that you're not just drawing toilets, 24/7. You're actually doing work, or mid-sized offices doing buildings, like real buildings, like libraries and whatever. They're getting built, and there's real people involved. It's not an installation. I think that's a much overlooked like experience to go through. I see it pretty often. I feel like, and I don't know. It's partly, I don't know what it is.
Every architecture program has someone that's really into Lebbeus Woods kind of drawings, right? Like,
Cults following, Yeah, no, I remember actually.
But I think it comes from the, I mean, as we know, like the teachers in the school, right? And their idols, like the architect that they admire, and that's kind of like who they, promote in the way they teach.
Yeah, and I think what I like about architecture too, and I do believe that the profession and the studying the craft is bettered when we have different people focusing on the different kind of layers of architecture. But your Lebbeus Wood, it reminds me, I was I think a third year, and we had like a third year like best in show like showcase thing. So everyone from all the studios would put up their work across all the 5 or 6 studios, and they'd have a jury come in and then decide like who gets the top 5 projects of that year. And I think the person who won, so obviously across like 5 different studios, you have 5 different teachers and completely different types of projects. Like some people are doing homeless shelters, which are very practical, real things. Other people are doing whatever, and other folks are doing like installations. And one kid, his pinup, and this is the end of the quarter of the semester, his pinup was layers of trace with chicken scratches. That's the best way I could describe it. Like Lebbeus Woods, like just graphite everywhere. And he got like second or first place. And all the kids who are struggling to figure out like how the fuck to actually design a building that worked were like, what the hell is this? Why did chicken scratch man? Why is he winning anything? Like that took him 2 seconds, and there's this whole conceptual, bullshit stuff going on. And I just remember being super frustrated by it, subjectively, but also I think objectively looking back. I'm like, come on, like you have people who are working really hard to try and understand, try to do the magic of merging both the conceptual, the artistic, and then the practical, and you have someone up there doing chicken scratches.
Yeah. So the comparison for architecture that I really like that kind of encapsulates what we're talking about is comparing it to food, right? Because when it comes to dining, we actually like all levels of conceptual versus just sort of craftsmanship that has very little coherent thought into it. So barbecue, where there's no conceptual thinking, no plating, no garnishing. It's just the craft of using this wood to smoke this meat. And maybe there's a few other sides that have various levels of innovation. That can be excellent and highly appreciated, a very craft-focused approach. But then we can go to, one of those restaurants that's in Chef's Table, and it may not be what we want on a daily basis and won't hit our macros, but as as a experience that can expand our conception of cuisine, phenomenal as well. So the question is like, what do we want? Or I actually think we want all aspects of design. We just want them in different proportions at different times, and everybody's formulation of how esoteric they want to sort of their design world to be versus how practical and efficient. I think that all has a place. And I think often in the profession, we kind of see one as, I think sometimes we maybe take it as a little too zero sum. I completely share the same sentiments about conceptual only design and architecture. To me, if you don't ship or you don't build, you render. And if anything, technology is going to make that kind of methodology even cheaper. But I think if we think about the best experience we've had with sort of food or travel, I think there's kind of another type of inspiration for how we don't have to commit to one of these lanes. We actually just might want to do the esoteric thing once every couple years or once a month, or explore that periodically, but not have to have it be the centerpiece of every project that we do.
Yeah, I agree. It's difficult to do what you're describing. Difficult in the sense of like for the person to do it. I think it's the skill set, the mindset to flip flop or not flip flop, but to kind of span the spectrum is not easy. I think it's also difficult once you get older and you have things to pay for and bills to pay, to find opportunities, to make opportunities to do that. It's very tough. So you found this practice, right? It gets very successful. And then at some point you choose to step away from it, the office rather.
Yeah. So we started our practice based on two technological changes that were happening at the time. Websites. Every architecture firm at that time had a Flash website, which didn't index well on search. Yeah. So here it is. And this is the folly of architects encapsulated in one technological moment. The greatest tool for sharing information and ideas that we've seen since the printing press happens. And what do architecture firms use it for? Flash websites where like the letters of the firm name move slowly across and it doesn't show up on search engines.
Yeah.
Totally they took the wrong thing. They used it as an aesthetic tool, not as an informational and communications platform. So there's always an advantage in being young. There's plenty of disadvantages. You don't have the capital and the network of the older people that you're competing with, but you have technological advantages. And so we built our firm on that. We used Revit from day one. And that gave us a speed advantage. And we were using Revit for the solar decathlon. So that was like the early, very clunky versions of it in like 2004, 2005. Wow. And so when we launched our firm, it was based on Revit. We also had a mechanical engineer as one of our founding partners. So we could, really focus on the rising interest in sustainable or energy efficient design. So what we did was we kind of wrote and blogged a lot about sustainable design, green design, kind of did very basic SEO strategy. And so even though our conversion for our website that only had one built project, which was a student project, the Solar Decathlon, we couldn't compete on a portfolio basis with high-end residential firms in the kind of greater New England area, but we could compete on amount of hits to our website. I think we were probably one of the top. If you searched like New England architecture or Boston architecture firm, we'd show up pretty high simply by focusing on that. And the other thing we said is like, we'll be able to outproduce these experienced firms, even though we don't have the detailed libraries they do. One, we're young and we're hungry and we're working for ourselves. But two, we're using a better technology platform in the form of building information modeling rather than 2D CAD. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's actually interesting because even if you didn't go to USC, you still managed to apply kind of the business mindset, right, to your creative thinking, which I think is pretty fascinating.
Our architecture is not an art form; it's a profession. It's classified as such, so you have to think of it that way, especially if that's what you're going to do for a living. So, yeah, I think that when we look at like the history of art and design and architecture, I think we often remove the business components that were essential to things happening. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like when people criticize kind of selfie culture and social media, I always like to remind them, well, you do know like a lot of those Renaissance paintings that you sort of revere as like, important cultural artifacts are just selfies for the rich Medici family. Right. Like it still all came from patronage and sponsorship and all these other kind of business apparatus to fund us. You think all these painters really wanted to paint angels, or was the Catholic Church just the one that had the biggest checkbook to pay them? Mm-hmm. So I think when we separate business from art and design in the past, we tend to be really frustrated with the present. But really, I think these dynamics are much more eternal.
Yeah, that's a great take. Yeah, it's really fascinating that in your story, there's been at least 2 or 3 points so far, and probably more in moving forward, that you found, or you were very aware of your time and place, in the broad scope and the local scope, and figuring out like what is a good way to be very productive given given what's around you, and for you also to get the most out of it. And it's just not a super common trait amongst creatives in general, especially those, to your last point, who only think about the creative work itself and just kind of hope or assume that that's going to be enough to have me become successful, to have get clients, to get whatever. And I agree completely. I don't think it's very realistic. Yeah, it does happen, of course. The 1 in a million, of course, it takes place, right? Someone gets really lucky, and they're very skilled, but it's just the chances are not very high. And I think that's one of the things the profession and the broad scope needs to do much better of, is thinking about these things. Because you're absolutely right. If you don't have that in place, nothing else. There's no clients, there's no money, there's no sponsor, there's no nothing to do the work. It's not cheap living in a capitalist society either. So like, it really doesn't work.
The unfairness of the systems in the world can be inspiring, but it can inspire more of like a desperate survival kind of climb that is often seen as kind of dirty or gross amongst sort of like elite academic circles.
Yep.
And I think as a young person being like, well, I really like my professors and I admire them and I've learned so much from them, but following their taste is not going to be good for my future. And in fact, they're probably going to end up respecting me more if I forge my own path and climb and claw my way to opportunity, rather than just sort of be little miniature versions of them. Mm-hmm. And I think that distinction is really, I think it's hard because someone's smart when they can see a system as unjust, but separate out the part that they disapprove from it and not be sort of paralyzed and not take any action because they're so upset by it. Mm-hmm. So I think all these things have always been, I observe it. Okay, the rich kids are going to have an advantage because they're being supported while they can get their credentials polished by working for one of these prestigious firms. Great. Not good or bad. I just have to do something else. So as long as you take that mentality of eliminating options that aren't right for you, you don't have to judge them. You just have to say, this isn't what I want to do. I'm going to do something else. And I'm going to try this. Oh, that doesn't work. Now I'm going to try this. But the more time you kind of spend wallowing in the unfairness of it, the more you kind of set yourself back. Yeah. But you asked why I left architecture. So to get back to that. So I didn't leave it directly. I actually stayed in the same office with the same friends. But I kind of was stuck at the idea of, we had just finished one of our biggest commissions. We did this beautiful modern house in Truro. It was our first project that was really published. Truro is a small little area of Cape Cod. It was gorgeous. And the minute we finished it, we got it photographed and, we ended up getting in a bunch of publications, which really got us off to the races as a business. I remember thinking, oh, great. Now we got to go sell another client. And that kind of cycle of like, you have the elation and then you're immediately followed by like, okay, we got to do this again. And I was kind of thinking then, like, where does this go? This project took, about 8 months to a year in the design process. It took another 14 to 18 months to build. And then it's not even going to get published in magazines because they put it on embargo for another 6 to 8 months. Yeah. And I started thinking, wait, this is like, to do something significant, it's like a 3 to 4 year commitment if it goes well. Yeah. And like that felt like too long of a cycle. And I also thought about how much intellectual waste we produced with every design we created.
Dude, so I said the same thing to Marina like this last week. The same thing. Yeah. Continue. Okay. So every time an architect designs a house, they actually design like 20 to 30 houses in various stages of completion. Yeah. And the client often picks. It would be rare that a client picks mostly good choices with each one of those design options that you present. So to break this down, you may meet with a client, you kind of get their sort of interest, and aesthetically they look through your portfolio and they tell you what they like and don't like. And you go, okay, we're in schematic design. So you look at the land and you may sort of create 3 to 4 different kind of concepts. Could include like sort of a rough sketch plus like a general floor plan, maybe nowadays more of a rendering and sort of a massing model plus like, a basic floor plan. So you might present 3 different
schematic designs at that first one. They pick the one that they like the best, or they always want to combine things from both, even if those combinations are like mixing sardines and peanut butter. They do it anyways.
Sardines and peanut butter.
So then you do another 3 options to kind of develop that, and you're trying to steer it and get more of that intellectual purity back in there, and so on and so forth. And so over the months of sort of meeting with them and getting a design that they're comfortable with, you've actually produced all these fragments of designs that were actually probably more conceptually pure and focused than the resulting thing that got picked by their kind of specific lifestyle. So you have a ton of intellectual waste. The other part of design where you see waste at a genocidal level is with design competitions, which I think are one of the worst things that the profession kind of like tolerates. Design competitions are a terrible thing. If someone does a design competition for a new museum, they might get 1,000 entries. And each one of those 1,000 entries maybe had conservatively like 40 to 50 hours put into sort of creating it. Some cases, I know people that have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on a design entry. Just for some group of people to pick the magic winner. And then even then, it's not like the winner gets anything significant. There's been so many competitions where the winner's project doesn't get built. The field is, because it's like we take sort of the investment of intellect and creativity into sort of documents for granted, we're very wasteful with it. And so when I was, running sort of zero energy design with Stephanie Horowitz and Jordan Goldman, my partners, I saw a lot of this sort of waste. I was like, every time we do a house for a client, we have all these other really good fragments left over. And I started looking at where I knew that single family houses were the most common building type in America. And I looked at where they're getting their, where are these coming from? And sure, there was like the Toll Brothers and the KB Homes and these big production builders, but about 30% of the houses in America come from stock house plans, and then sort of either contractors building on spec, or like a homeowner, finding that floor plan and getting it bid out by a contractor. And I was like, wait. And we had already taken some meetings with modular companies, and was interesting, but like very capital intensive. I was like, wait, architects don't make buildings. We make drawings. Drawings are a type of media. Media can be disseminated over the internet. We should be treating architecture and design for the masses as a media business model. And so I went out with my business partner, who was an MBA, Dave Wax. We raised a bunch of money. We won it's like an all Ivy League business plan competition. And basically our proposal, and this was kind of in this kind of second era of the .com booms, we said, we're going to publish house plans for free. And typically house plans are sold for like $500 to $1,000. And then we're going to sell advertising directly into the blueprints. And this is how we can hit that low end of the market and then improve the stock of house plans that are available. And we were doing it with, we even built in energy modeling and created a bunch of software hacks so that you could look at a house plan and it would be like, this is the standard level of building detail that would get you through sort of building code. But we think you should do these energy upgrades. We think you should do continuous insulation on the outside and do these things. And if you do that, put in your zip code and we'll show you how much energy you'll save. And you could download a little report that would compare. If you invested more into the building envelope and better doors and windows, you could do this. And if you think about it, a lot of people know the brand of appliances. Quite a few people even know the brand of their flooring or their countertops. Very few people know the brand of their roofing or their insulation or these kind of things that actually make up a much bigger cost component of their new home. And so we said, these companies need help advertising and they need it tied into overall building performance. So we started a company called Free Green, raised a bunch of money in 2007, launched it, and we became the biggest supplier of home designs pretty quickly. And that wasn't hard to do. We only had 12 different house plan designs when we launched, But because we were giving them away for free, we dominated in traffic. So we became the biggest supplier of home designs. We're sort of off to the races. And then 2008 happens, and the fund that invested in us was like a venture fund that was investing in a lot of sustainable. They invested in all the US based solar companies at the time, and in us. They went under, so we didn't get the second half of the money that we were kind of promised. And the advertising market for construction completely disappeared for a couple of years. Yeah. So it kind of hurt our growth. We kind of, my business partner was like, look, this isn't, I can't take this kind of salary hit that we were going to have to take. So I kind of stayed on, kept it afloat. And then eventually it got acquired for sort of parts in like 2013, 2014.
Wow.
We continued to be like a major supplier, but we just were never able to sort of quite get the flywheel going between the marketing side and the production side. But we still had a reasonable exit. And that was kind of when I was like, okay, I like this idea of being a designer at large, where I can share immediately with people over the internet, and have almost not have a single individual client I have to focus, but almost different demographics as the design client. But at that time, everyone in media was trying to pivot to video. And I was like, okay, I'm free of this previous obligation. I like this idea of designers make media. Media can be a business. I'm going to be a designer that does business through media. And since pivoting to video was hard for the Apartment Therapies, the Huffington Post, all these BuzzFeed, all these hot media companies were struggling with this basic task. I was like, okay, I'm going to start a one-man design firm that pivots to media from day one. And so that's where kind of the video started. So about like 15 years ago, I started dabbling with it, and then it took off pretty quick. And I kind of based the early projects around, every time I'd go to one of my architecture friends' house, they'd always have something that was like the most elegant DIY project. Like I remember one professor, he made his curtains out of drafting mylar, and he just like glued like a little steel tube and then stretched the steel cable. And it was just this like sliding translucent panel to like dampen the light. And I was like, one, really inexpensive. It was totally something new that I hadn't seen before. Very thoughtful, very practical. And I was like, oh, DIY stuff is so associated with like, cutouts of heart and live, laugh, love bullshit that like, there's kind of a room for a slightly more refined version of that. And of course, there's an unending appetite for a design that costs less.
That's an incredible story. That's the fourth or fifth time that you've pulled the bunny out of the magic hat. I feel like, so with the housing plans available online. Well, I'm trying to back up here. So I had a question when you were talking about. Oh yeah. So you start off, or one of the things you said was, the waste, the intellectual waste that happens when you're an architect, and I fully agree with it. Marin and I talked about this a lot recently, and so I'm curious though. So your solution for a certain period of time was to put the work out there, right, and let people have it. I'm curious if you've had any thoughts about what would be I'd say a profession-wide solution to the challenge of all of this intellectual work, which, like you said, maybe it stops at SD or DD, but the projects, the designs still have a lot of legs, right? Like they could go somewhere for real. Like, have you thought about like what would be a solution for that for the average architect? Like, is it for them to do their own work? Is it for them to also sell, these 75% completed plans online, or something else?
Every good architecture firm knows who their clients are. They have sort of a profile. They're about this kind of income level. They're probably in these sort of professions. These are sort of their lifestyle interests. You sort of develop this target demo. That target demo is very narrow. And so that means that there's opportunity in not just scaling a bigger firm so that you can reach more of those people and a bigger marketing team so you can capture more of those people. It's actually expanding to what you're already doing, but that who can afford to hire you. So it's like looking at people that are at not 100% of the income level to sort of pull off a project with you. You want to ask the question is, who are the people that are at like 50 to 80% of that level, right? Then I think stock house plans are a great option for them. And it's both an act of goodwill that can sort of benefit that, but it's also a great thing for sort of connecting with sort of general contractors that might be building homes on spec, right? And I think if I was to do the houseplant thing again, and I think it's a better time to do it now. So let's say you had taken this approach and you have like a nice 1,800 square foot house that you think is just like the Ames house for today, right? Like the case study house. It's not too extravagant. It's very buildable. Nothing's builder grade. Nothing's sort of super imported and too extravagant. Just like the really solid design that won't ever be on the front of the magazine, but you would be so proud if more people could have access to this house. That's the good house to make a plan for and put it up for sale for like $100, right? Way cheaper than another one. And so what you're doing right there is you're still keeping people from just like screen scraping and stealing it. $100 is still $100, but you're providing something that's way undervalued or way underpriced, but way overvalued. And we did this with the shipping container house that I built. So for the record, I think shipping container houses are generally like a pretty bad idea. You don't want to start with the cladding and then use that as a quasi structure and infill inside of it. And they're also like really skinny. And the minute you sort of start cutting them to combine them, you're fundamentally undermining
you're losing
what was
the whole
good
point
about
of it.
them in the beginning.
Yeah.
So, but people are fascinated by them and think that and because people are so desperate for like affordable or alternative housing solutions, there was a lot of interest in them. So I kind of did a docuseries on building a shipping container house from scratch. And I kind of did it with the sort of approach of like Mythbusters, like, yes, this is doable. I'm going to take this very seriously. I'm going to do as good of a job as I can. I'm going to show every single step from how this increased our structural engineering cost versus a stick build cost, how this created challenges with permitting because it's an unusual building type. And here's what it kind of looks like at the end. 20 million people downloaded or watched that sort of 10-part YouTube series.
Whoa. And
we made the PDF plans of this. And this plan is not very reproducible, right? It is, it's a 700 square foot house, right? Most people are going to want something bigger. They were separate as individual cabins, so you had to walk outside between the bedrooms, which is perfect for kind of a Joshua Tree Airbnb, but not great for someone's full-time residence. So I had the PDFs with the structural engineering and everything in them, and we put them up for sale for $100. And I think we've sold 2,500 copies of them, right? And we're very clear, like, we're not customizing these for you. You're buying a PDF, and this PDF is what we used, but 2,500 people found enough value to sort of pay $100. And that was, about the cost of the house itself to build. So I think if you're a homeowner too, you also have to think about this from the client perspective. If you're a couple and maybe you have like a combined income of like $400,000 a year, and you sort of we're not seeing anything in the housing market that we really like.
Yeah.
And maybe we get some land in like Temecula and hire an architect and build a house, right? Mm-hmm. It seems reasonable for them. Like $400,000 a year as a family income is like, those are successful people. they're doing quite well. But we know how expensive this whole endeavor is. And I think thinking about how many people there are in that sort of, still very privileged range, that custom architecture and high-end building isn't really quite the right fit. That's where I think getting creative and creating solutions for that multitude of people becomes interesting. And I think it can be sort of a hybrid of, this is a new business development arm that makes us a little more recession proof or makes us a little bit more anti-fragile. And it's also something that's probably good for the built environment to have a little more art and craftsmanship into this. And I kind of think of this as like, if you're a chef and you have, I was going to say Noma, but that chef's gotten in a little trouble.
They've been used recently, yeah.
If you're a chef for one of those fancy restaurants, like doing a cookbook that's a little bit more accessible, but still has some of the conceptual robustness that helped you make your name, but brings some of those ideas to people that can't afford $300 meals. I think that's a good thing.
I agree, it's a good thing, and I think we'll see more architects exploring this area. I also feel like, this goes all the way back to almost the very beginning of the recording when you were saying that we all tend to study, learn, and idolize these architects who do these wonderful projects, but they cost a shit ton of money. And also they had basically a patron, right? At some level, a client for those types of projects are more like patrons of the arts than anything else. And it's like, well, what about the 99% of everything else that's out there? It's just, I don't know. I've been doing a lot of thinking about this, and we'll probably continue conversations with you on this matter. But it's the construction cost is so high. It's funny for... so we participated in what's called the Case Study 2.0 program in LA, which you might have heard about. And basically it's a catalog, right? It's a catalog of houses that were pre-designed by a bunch of different architects. And that program has opened up to a lot of other architects participating. And it was super fascinating for a lot of different reasons. The designs were meant to be, the houses were meant to be designed in a ways that they could be built for a relatively cost-effective amount for West Side LA. Let me be clear about that. A lot of architects didn't really care about the budget, apparently, and didn't really think through the construction of it. But anyway, what I was going to say was, as a result of that, we end up as an office speaking to a lot of people interested in the house. And for the first time in a while, we were hit with all these folks calling on a very wide spectrum, again, of what their conception, idea of what a house should cost or an architect should cost. So people were like, how much does it cost to hire you to do the house? And the program specified as $25 a square foot is the architect's fee to do not just design drawings, but CDs, permits, and CA. And some people were like, that is such a good deal. Oh my gosh. And other people were like angry, like, this is such a ripoff. How dare you charge $25 a square foot to do the house? Obviously, selling a PDF of let's say design plans online is not the same thing as an architect doing permits, CDs, and CA. But that was also a more recent thing that occurred to me. Where I'm like, whoa, there is this super wide spectrum, and a lot of people out there, their reference point is more of the like $100 for design plans, or $350 a square foot for construction costs, which is light years away from what we hear, in custom houses in LA. And so I don't really have a question with everything I was saying, other than that it's definitely a problem. It's a good one to solve.
Yeah. So are people think that I think one of the fundamental challenges that architecture as a profession has is that at the residential level, people think they're paying for a house plan. They think they're paying for the drawings and not for the service. And that would be like thinking that you go to a restaurant and you're paying for the recipe and the ingredients, right? Not the craft, the sourcing, the R&D, all these kind of things that lead up to it, the servers, the ambiance, the lighting, all those. So one, architecture is a service, and it's a professional grade service that helps you manage one of the most important investments you're ever going to make, your residence, and having that kind of oversight and check and balance so you don't get taken advantage of by the general contractor, quality control, helping you deal with the administrative bureaucracy of permitting and all of these things. That is a comprehensive, valuable service that deserves compensation. All of those things add up to a level of care that's not affordable for the vast majority of people.
Yeah.
And so if you put the burden on architects to make that cheaper, they're in a really tough place where they want to maintain their ethics and their quality of service, and you're asking them to do it for a fraction of the price. So I think the challenge of scaling that down, if you try to scale everything down, everything gets diluted and the pressure and constraint builds. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like when you try to value engineering an expensive building into a cheap building, I almost feel like you kind of want to start from scratch and just design the cheap building. Yeah. Because the value engineering of the expensive thing into nothing is, one, it's exhausting and it's painful because all of those things were in there for a good reason. And you're almost better at starting from scratch. And so if like one of the areas that I'm really interested in for these next few years, kind of looking at California and the landscape and the frustration with the housing economy, is, okay, affordable housing, you even bring up that term and you're immediately, especially if you bring it up on social media, people are like, oh, I heard about these affordable housing things that cost $1,000 a square foot and no one lives in them. And people are almost have worn out that phrase, and to the point where it means it's too culturally loaded.
Yeah.
I think the thing that's really interesting in houses is, what is the cheapest house you can build in Southern California? And almost remove any kind of like architectural intent and just be, what is the cheapest calories I could feed hungry people to? Mm-hmm. And if you sort of do think of that as sort of a design thought exercise, you come up with something that's pretty bleak, right? But I think the question, if you're interested in kind of addressing the kind of affordability crisis, is when I look at that abomination of cheapness, do I see a foundation of which I can add a little bit? You know, I kind of think of it as like last weekend I had a dinner party and I fed 9 people, and I think the total grocery bill was like $70. And we did a tri-tip, a pot of rice, and a whole bunch of grilled vegetables. Everyone was happy. It was great.
Yeah.
And because we started with the rice, which is, you know, about as cheap as you can get, but has a high approval rating,
right,
you kind of like pair the protein around that, and then find did like a big cucumber salad and some grilled leeks and poblano peppers, and it was fantastic. Right? So I think that's if you try to scale down your very high-end professional service, mm-hmm, I feel like that can be really frustrating and full of friction. But if you look at things like what's happening, oh man, it's kind of, have you heard of a barn dominium?
What is it?
A barn dominium?
Barn dominium. No, no. What is that?
Okay. So this is like this like trend in self-built housing. Not as offensive as earthships. That's terrible. But basically people get like a 40 by 60 industrial steel building kit.
Okay.
And they pour a slab and they erect that over that. And then they build their house inside of that. Ooh. Right. So it's like a big industrial barn to give them just square footage. You can get a 40 by 60 foot, kind of structure and cladding package for like $30,000. Mm-hmm. You can pour a big slab like that for maybe like another 18 to 22, depending on where you're at. But for under $100,000, you can get like 2,400 square feet in the dry. Now you got to insulate and do all those things, electrical, plumbing. But it's become this kind of interest because a lot of people, they just want a big chunk of square footage affordably, and then they want to kind of figure out what they actually want to do in it. Mm-hmm. So architects would look at this phenomena the same way chefs might look at like a deep fried Snickers as just being like taking something that's terrible or not very thoughtful and then just using it in the wrong application. You're just compounding the mistake. But I think that there's actually the concept of that, right? Because if you told an architecture firm like, hey, you have a free giant greenhouse kit to start your project. It's free. Can you build something cool inside a giant industrial greenhouse? Every architect I know is be like, oh, that's
cool.
kind of fun.
Yeah, conceptual.
Exactly, right?
Double envelopes, whatever. Let's do it.
Exactly. So I think that there's, that kind of era or that kind of focus on ultra cheapness. If some people will look at that exercise and find it completely dispiriting and uninspiring, and I think others might look at it and be like, wait, I think I could work with that and it's often a vacation. So for me right now, the obsession in cheapness is in the form of polycarbonate, which, none of us like plastic in general, but window and door packages are so expensive. Polycarbonate has a much better U value. It can be used with or without frames. It's inexpensive. It's lightweight. You can get a 4 by 8 foot panel for like $180, and it's fantastic. It's not conductive, and it lets in a pretty beautiful amount of light. So I wouldn't use it for picture windows, but could I, use it to make a ceramic studio, and that's the whole north wall is made out of that, and it allows the room to stay cool, but also lets in a ton of ambient light without blowing up the budget. Oh, now we're on to something. So I think if we want to, I think it would be fun to dabble, and I think it's also good to diversify your clientele and your income streams. But I think trying to sort of squeeze what you do so well at the high end into a cheaper version.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
I almost think you're better starting from scratch.
I fully agree. And I think starting from scratch, even in a pushing that further, which I know you've thought about from the inside out, like at all layers. So thinking about design, how design is disseminated, the execution of the project management, I think everything needs to be kind of critiqued. I think that's a really exciting space to be in. And because the numbers are the gap is too big. If we were make something like $20 a square foot off, then okay, yeah, fine. But we're talking about 10x being off almost, right? And 10x, is that right? Yeah, if not more so in some cases. And so I fully appreciate what you're saying. This hour and a half went by crazy fast. We had a bunch of questions loaded. I didn't even get to ask you yet. So that's just, I always say it to the guests, but I think we'll definitely have you on again. I want to be mindful of time. So this is like a very abrupt ending, I feel like, to this date. But
let's do it. Let's do it in person next time.
That sounds good. So our final question, I think Marita can ask you this one, but her camera paused. Let me see if I can reboot it.
Our final question, as you might know, is what is your favorite building?
Oh, wow.
Give us a cheap one and an expensive one.
It always changes. I think Maison de Verre was like the first one that I really love.
Yeah.
Because especially now, glass brick, Maison de Verre gets better and better with age because we've seen how often glass brick gets used terribly.
Yeah.
So Maison de Verre was actually the kind of impetus for one of my current projects where I'm working with solid glass brick, which is awesome because glass bricks are kind of, or glass block is hollow and it has just too much cultural residue associated with it. Mm-hmm. Solid glass brick. I got them from Alibaba. So again, on the affordable end, you just got to get the whole container full of them. And I got a laser cutter in my garage now. So I've been laser cutting steel brackets to kind of hold these glass bricks so I can make heavy things that are easy to still move and ship, where I would pack up the bricks separately and then ship like a steel structure that holds them all in place. So Maison de Verre would be one, and I'm sure that's on the higher end. I think I've always, let me tell you a bunch of buildings that I think aren't good. And it relates to what you were talking about with sort of like disaster relief. When Hurricane Katrina happened, Brad Pitt's foundation, very well intended, said, you know what? Let's bring fancy people to a serious problem, which is not good. You don't want, if you need a raincoat, Prada and Gucci shouldn't be your first options. You should be researching Gore-Tex.
Right.
So that encapsulated, I think, so much of what was wrong with architecture. It's like, let's bring in, let's bring in the fanciest people in the world to New Orleans to design disaster relief housing and let them start with sort of conceptual theory and all these things. And meanwhile, these people are like, can we just have a roof, and we need it up on sticks, and we need it to work. Yeah. So I think that's and I like bringing that up because I think it is a form of inspiration. It's a form of inspiration as we develop a reputation and some success to stay humble, that just because we're good at one thing doesn't mean that our ideas are going to be good everywhere. So I find that story, and I like all those firms. And I like Brad Pitt. I mean, F1 was awesome.
It looks good.
And I like their intent. I'm not even criticizing that. I'm glad they tried. But it's a reminder that just because we're good in the cultural niche that we've carved out for ourselves doesn't mean that we have all the solutions in that surrounding area.
Yeah, it's beautifully said. Didn't they have like actual structural issues with those houses too? Like building performance issues, not just the design was funky. I recall reading that, and I was surprised. I'm like, how does that even happen? How do you allow
designed by interns?
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
There's a meeting, and a principal kind of says, "Oh yeah, here's a concept sketch. We're not really getting paid much for this. We just want to be Brad Pitt, so we'll show the party. Here's our idea. Interns, go figure it out."
I actually think I think that happened with some of the houses in the Case Study 2.0 program. Some of the larger offices here, I'm like, yeah, I think an intern did this because it's pretty crappy. And then they changed their design later on. I'm like, I think you guys realized that it wasn't good, and you retracted your original design. Anyway.
Wait, I got a question for you guys.
Yeah.
Have you been considering, for like something like the Case Study House? You have a good firm. You have good connections into the building community. Have you thought about doing a house on spec?
Let's talk offline.
Okay.
Yes. But we should definitely have a chat about a lot of different things, including that for sure.
Yeah.
Ben, this was awesome, man. This was a great way to end the week. Appreciate it. Let's keep the conversation going. Love what you're doing, and all of your links will be in the description, obviously, for those few who don't know of you yet.
Fun.
Thanks everyone for listening to this week's episode. If you want to support the show, then the best way to do that is, I guess you could just leave a review of it in the Apple Podcasts app. You can follow us on Spotify.
The best way is to follow us and keep listening, right?
Yeah, follow us, keep listening. We're on Spotify, YouTube, and we also have an Instagram account, which is Second Studio Pod. Give us a follow on there. We post clips, guest work images, quotes, announcements, things like that.
Yeah, you can also call the hotline or text the hotline 213-222-6950 if you have any guests you want to see on the show, any topics you want us to talk about, any questions you're seeking answers to. This is the number.
That's the number. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll talk soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.